Well, a reminder of our top story this hour. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has been forced to deliver her policy speech on video after her attempt to do so in person was heckled down in the Legislative Council.
In the televised speech, she announced measures to address Hong Kong's housing shortage and other livelihood issues. But are these enough?
For an expert perspective, we speak with Andrew Shuen, Research Director at the Lion Rock Institute. Okay, first up, Mrs Lam's policy address disrupted by pro-democracy lawmakers. What does that show?
Well, usually in previous years, there were one or two legislators that were more radical, that would disrupt and then get asked to leave by the president of the Legislative Council. But this year, every single opposition legislator was in unison in heckling her. So if the president was to ask them to leave, there will be an insufficient amount of legislators in the chamber for quorum, and therefore the speech itself would be in effect, will not be in effect. So I guess she already made contingency plans, and therefore she chose to deliver the speech via video, and the legislators, just like me, got to watch it online.
Yes, and in that address, in that policy address, she focused largely on housing policies. Are her solutions any more different than what her predecessors have proposed?
Actually, no, and I'm extremely disappointed. In fact, in your previous video just now, they showed some of the, even the loyal pro-establishment legislators being unhappy. In fact, I would like to take this chance. I see that some of my previous videos on Channel News Asia posted on YouTube, and some of the comments left was that I am a pro-protester commentator. To be honest, I'm not pro either side. I'm simply commenting on what was effective and what is not. But unfortunately, Beijing's stance and message is that this particular anger within the people of Hong Kong stems from housing and income disparity. But unfortunately, for the people of Hong Kong, you don't see teenagers going onto the streets and being shot by the police because they feel that it takes 5 instead of 3 years to obtain public housing. In Hong Kong, if you look at the homeless shelters, the occupancy rate is only 30%. And social workers can actually tell you that 95% of all those who stays in the streets have substance abuse problems. And the homeless shelters are all in rural areas and not in urban areas. And therefore, they can't access their substance of choice. So in Hong Kong, there is no homeless problem. There is no such thing as housing problem. What Hong Kong has is a home ownership problem. And by today's policy, today's announced policy, which is to make even more land for public housing, which is for rental, it actually drives up private housing even higher. So if housing was the true cause of this protest, then no, it's ineffective. But unfortunately, the true cause of this protest that we're seeing in the streets of Hong Kong is the Hong Kong-China tension. If, for example, Carrie Lam came out and said, from now on, Hong Kong will aim within 10 to 20 years to have a water supply that is independent from China, then yes, it would contribute to calming the protest. If Carrie Lam came out and said all the welfare recipients and the welfare applicants, new migrants from China, will now have their income and assets in China assessed as well, because they are not currently, then yes, that will also lower the protest. If Carrie Lam came out and said that new public housing would not disproportionately go to all the new migrants from China, then yes, that will also calm the protest. Or there might be a huge change in the curriculum of the schools, in which all the high-ranking officials don't send their own children to the local school system. If these issues are actually addressed, then yes, the protest will calm down. So that is why you see even opposition legislators today criticizing her for her lack of policies to end the protests.
So do you think she just simply ignored them, knowing that these would have perhaps maybe allayed the protesters?
Well, I think this is a clear sign that she is towing the Beijing line, which is don't yield a single inch. And if she was to have those policies that I mentioned, that has nothing to do with those 5 demands that the protesters talks about every day, that symbolically is yielding to the protesters. So she wants to toe the Beijing line, which is not negotiate, because in Beijing's eyes, these are not protesters. These are violent, perhaps even borderline terrorists, and you don't negotiate with terrorists, as Thatcher famously said. So I guess she is going to ride out the storm, and hopefully it will just blow over. She's arresting school children every single day, 20 to 30 of them, and eventually she'll run out of young people to arrest, and hopefully by then the calm will come back.
Thank you very much, Andrew Shuen, the research director at the Lion Rock Institute, speaking to us regarding Mrs. Lam's policy address today.